wanted to go over some bank statements as well. So bank statements, unfortunately, they don't all look the same either. We do have different banks, but there's some certain things that we can see, and it'll show the different. It'll let us know what kind of like property or what kind of asset it is. So I have a few here, but so for example, right here I have a few different bank accounts. So I have a Wells Fargo, a SunWest, this East West, a Robinhood, and this SoFi. Between all these, if you can see whether it says checking, it'll say savings, it'll say IRA, Roth, 401k, some type of retirement. So we always want to, any of these documents that have these, for example, this Robinhood, it doesn't specify what it is, but we do see here that's like dividends and capital gains distributions. So this one in particular is a stock. There is an account number. So this one, even though it's a stocks account, we're still going to label it as bank statement underscore bank name underscore last four account numbers of the account number underscore the right, the date and the borrower's name. Again, this one here has checkings, the account name, dates. For the dates on the bank statements, if it's an actual bank statement like this one, we always want to put the ending date. If it's a transaction history, we want to go ahead and put the date from the beginning date of the transaction to the end date of the transaction, which I'll show you an example in a bit. But for example, this one here, it does have two accounts here, the checkings and the savings. So when we label this, we would put bank statement underscore Wells Fargo underscore, and then you want to put both account numbers. So in this case, it'd be 0794 underscore 5915. And then the rest of how you would label bank statements. So if there were several accounts, for example, I have this one here in particular had several account numbers. So all these account numbers, when we label it, we want to indicate each account number here. Going on to the transaction history that I had mentioned previously, again, you're going to see a bank name, what type of account it is. Sometimes it'll be savings, like I mentioned, checkings. Sometimes it could be a CD. It'll have the account, the number, at least the last four, so we can identify where this account is coming from, right? And so for this one, you would just put the bank statement underscore Wells Fargo, the account number, and then you would put the dates. So you would put transaction history, and then in this case, you would put 3/29/24 through the last date, which is June 27, 24.
So that's for the transaction history.
Yes. So for transaction, again, it'll state transactions here, but if you can see, it's specifically to like the transactions only going in and out for this account in particular, right? So because the transaction history is done when we don't have the actual statement done. So in this case, this bank statement, right? We have the bank statement from April 30th. And let's say, so let me see. Yeah, so this is from 4/1 to 4/30. So if they were to do, let's say they were to do a transfer on May 10th, well, technically we don't have the actual statement anymore. So because the new statement hasn't been done, which should be done at the end of May, right? So that's why we would get this transaction history, and this one was provided with more than 2 months, but we would technically need the transaction history from 4/30 to the date. So let's say let's say this account here was from June 30th, right? We would need the account June 30th up until today, July 7th. So we wouldn't need a full 2-3 months of the transaction history. We would just need the last, week and a half, 2 weeks? Yeah, about 2 weeks. Does that make sense?
A little bit of confusion. Sorry.
So again, let's say this statement here is from June. So instead of saying 4/30, it's 6/30, right? Okay. So let me see. If I pull up this calendar here, can you see it on the side?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let's say our statement is here, June 30th, right? But we transferred money from our account on July 5th. But because we don't have the new May statement, that's a new July statement that's going to be issued to the 31st, we're going to request this transaction history to until today, July 11th. So that way we can see what happened with like the money that was transferred, deposited throughout these days here from the 30th to the 11th.
Makes sense. Because the bank, because the statement, just to clarify, but to confirm, because the statement is going to be issued at the end of the month. So that's why we are needing the transaction history rather than a statement.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And then I think that's about it. The only other thing was I think with the pay stubs, I think that you guys were okay with. The only thing I just wanted to just re-emphasize is when you're putting the dates on the pay stub, you want to go ahead and put the pay period end date. Pay stub. Let's look up a pay stub. there's several dates, right? So this document date, this is usually the date that they receive their check. So our date, when we label this, we want to put the end date of the pay period.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other last thing before I let you go. So on our settlement statement, I did want to, for purchases, we have a master and we have a buyer.
That's for purchase only.
Yes. So purchase only, you're always going to have a master and a buyer. So this one here, these two, this master one, the difference between this master and this buyer, as you can see, it's the same property address and it looks very similar. The only thing is on our master, we're going to have the sellers and the buyer's cost. On our buyer's settlement statement, we're only going to have our buyer's cost.
Okay.
Okay.
So there are two. How about for refinance? Do we need the seller's FSS like that?
No. So for a refinance, you don't need a master settlement statement. You are only going to get a buyer settlement statement. But when we label it, we don't have to put buyer because he's not buying it. We're just putting ESS because it's a refinance. He's not purchasing anything. So only on a purchase is when we're going to have these two statements, the master and the buyers.
All right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, when we've closed the loan, when it's funded, so before I go there, on these estimated statements here, as you can see, it says estimated, we're always going to put the issue date, the date that we're receiving the statement, or the date that escrow made the statement. So once we fund the loan, once it's closed, we get a final settlement statement. Again, for purchase, it's going to be both the master and the settlement. And the difference here is just literally the name. This one states it's a final versus the other one that states it's an estimated. So when it's a final, we're going to label it master FSS or buyer's FSS. On these final settlement statements, we are going to put the date of the disbursement, the date that they funded and sent out the money. So in this case, it's going to be July 5th versus the date that they issued this statement was July 8th. Does that make sense?
So if it's being funded, it's the disbursement date. So not the statement date anymore.
No. On the final settlement statement, we're always going to put the disbursement date.
I know. Sorry. Good.
Any questions? Anything that while I was going that kind of just you might have thought about, or it doesn't necessarily have to be through any of these documents that I showed you, but I think these were the most ones that I think everyone was kind of having trouble with. But no questions?
None for now.
No? Okay. Well, if you